In this video, I'm going to show you another of my favorite stone setting techniques. I call this a weave setting. For this project, you'll need a ruler, wire cutters, chain nose pliers, and nylon tipped pliers. Another set of tools that I like to use for these settings that aren't really necessary but do make it a lot easier is a set of these little sunglass screwdrivers. You can get these at the dollar store. Other than that, I like to use some sort of clamp to hold the project while I'm working. This is like a jeweler's ring clamp, or these little clamps from the hardware store work just as well. The materials that we need for this project are 2 4-inch pieces of 16 gauge half round and 2 4-inch pieces of 18 gauge half round, 3 feet of 28 gauge round wire, and then I have some 3mm stones that I'll be setting in this piece. To start, I'm going to take my 2 pieces of 16 gauge and put them in the ring clamp, approximately the width of another piece of 16 gauge apart. To start the weave, I'm going to take my 28 gauge, wrap it around the one on my right twice, and slide it to the bottom. Then I'm going to cross it over once and wrap it around once on the other side. Then bring it straight back to my wire on the right, locking these 2 pieces together. To connect my 2 pieces of 18 gauge half round, I need to take my 16 gauge out of the clamp and go straight across the top and wrap it around one time so that it's facing straight up and ready to lock in my 2 pieces of 18 gauge. I'm going to put these 2 right on top of the weave that we've already created in between the 2 pieces of 16 and bring my 20 gauge or 28 gauge down and around my right side one time. I'm going to repeat that same weave one more time, taking my 28 over the top of the 16, pulling it straight down to make it flush, up underneath the 18, pulling it straight up to make it flush, around the 16 twice, then over the top of the 18, straight down, and around the 16 again one more time. Once I have these 2 pieces of 18 locked in, I like to pull them out and off to the sides just a little bit, maybe 15 degrees to either side. From here, I'm going to create the setting underneath the stone. To do that, it's a really simple, really repetitive weave. I'm going to take my 28 over the top of my 16, under my other 16, around once, and back to the beginning. Around once to lock, and back again, a little slower. Around the 16 once, twice, and then underneath the 16 and around. We want to weave until we have about the width of the stone. So if we look at these little 3mm faceted citrine and place it upside down on top, it's just a little bit over, which is exactly where I'm looking to be. To finish that weave, I like to clamp it in my pliers just to make sure that it's nice and flat. The next step is to bring our 18 gauge back into the weave. To do that, I like to flatten both back down and pull out to about a 45-degree angle from each other. You can see this one on the left is on top and this one on the right is underneath. I want to switch those positions so that this one on the left will be underneath for the next stone. And then this one will be on top, back to that 45-degree angle to each other, creating that nice little transition there. To lock that in place with a weave, you're going to take your 28 gauge and go underneath both 18s, but over the top of the 16 on the other side, and wrap around. If you wrap it around twice, and then over the top, both 18s, underneath the 16. From here, bring both of your 18 gauge back to the center on top of each other, parallel to the 16s, and pull them straight down underneath the weave. That causes the setting to bulge a little bit. From there, I like to take my little screwdriver, give it a little bit of encouragement, pulling those a little bit away from the weave. From here, we can take one of our faceted stones and slide it in that gap. Make sure that the culet is pointed down so you get the maximum brilliance for the stone. To set it, pull your 18 gauge back up one at a time. I like to pinch it back down, sliding everything tight. Kind of wiggle them to pull tight in that 45 degrees. And to really lock it in, we're going to take our 18 gauge one more time over the top of the 16, under both 18s, over the around the 16, come back through, over both 18, under the 16, and around one more time. From here, we're going to repeat the same process to set the second stone. I went ahead and did the weave under the setting for the second stone, but I'm going to show you how to switch these 18 gauge wires again one more time. You can see at this juncture right here, where the 18 gauge comes from the right, crosses over to the left, and where this one comes from the left and crosses back under to the right. We want to continue that pattern for the strength of the setting. To do so, we'll start with our left wire, and we'll pull it back across to about there, and then we'll take the right and pull it across so that they're sitting at about 45-degree angle to each other. You can see that smooth transition there. For the weave, we're going to take the 28 over the top of the 16, under both 18s, around the 16 on the left, over both 18s, and around the 16 on the right. To prepare it for stone setting, bring both 18 gauge back to the center, parallel to the 16s, and back down underneath to create that bulge that we can insert our screwdriver to pry it back up. To set the stone, we slide it back in with the culet facing down into our weave and pull our 18 gauge back to level. We want to pull them back to that 45-degree angle to create that crisscrossing pattern. Now when we get to this point, we can go back with our chain nose pliers and flatten that connection around the first stone. That way this setting is locked and it doesn't begin to close as we weave later on. We can repeat that again after we set the third stone. And there we got 3 stones in, just finishing up locking in this last setting. And this technique is pretty repetitive, so if there's any step that I kind of skipped over a little bit as I got into the second and third stones, it's the exact same method that I used in the first stone, so it's worth just rewinding to watch that. And here we go. Pull those back to parallel. We can take our chain nose, flatten that join there to keep it all locked in. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos similar in the future. If you have any more questions or clarification for things I covered in the video, leave me a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.